It's 5 p.m. here in Nigeria. Let's take you on a journey around the world in the next hour. I'm Joke Rogers. Here's what's coming up on the world today. U.S. President Joe Biden meets national security team over concerns of possible Iranian retaliatory attack on Israel. At least 5 people killed as tropical hurricane Debby makes landfall on Florida. The world today begins right now. Welcome back. A Virginia man has appeared in the U.S. federal court charged with making death threats against Vice President Kamala Harris. The federal court identified the man as Frank Lucio Carrillo. According to court records, Mr. Carrillo appeared to have made several threats against not just the Vice President Harris, but also U.S. President Joe Biden, FBI Director Christopher Wray, and several Arizona officials. In response to the subpoena, the FBI found 4,359 social media posts from Mr. Carrillo targeting various public officials, including VP Harris. In several posts, Mr. Carrillo allegedly threatened to cut out Vice President Harris' eyes and described various ways he wanted to kill the Vice President. However, a hearing has been set for Thursday to determine whether Mr. Carrillo will remain behind bars while waiting a resolution in his case. As promised earlier, we can now tell you that U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris has named her running mate for the upcoming presidential election as Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. The choice of a running mate is considered the most consequential decision of Ms. Harris' political career. She had earlier narrowed down her search for a running mate to two finalists, 51-year-old Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro and 60-year-old Mr. Walz. As expected, reactions have been trailing. The former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, applauded the Walz vice presidential selection, saying she knows the Minnesota governor well and that they served together in the House of Representatives. The Trump-Vance campaign has also responded to the Walz pick, calling him a San Francisco liberal wannabe and a dangerously liberal extremist. Mr. Walz spent more than 2 decades in the Army National Guard, which included a deployment overseas after the 9/11 attacks, working as an educator and coach before shockingly defeating a 6-term Republican incumbent congressman in 2006, a wave year for the Democrats. And earlier, Pennsylvania residents shared their excitement and reasons why Governor Josh Shapiro should be a great running mate for Vice President Kamala Harris.
I think Governor Shapiro is an excellent choice for Vice President Harris. I think he would do a lot of great things for the country and be able to tackle some hard issues. And it's a swing state, like that's an important thing as well. When you look across the state of Pennsylvania, I think it's starting to change as far as some of the economy and things like that, but I would like to see a little bit more here in the city of Philadelphia. Like I said, with homelessness, some of the things that we have here, domestic violence, things like that, I would love to see a little bit more, conservative types of things as far as implementation on some of the domestic issues that the city here in Philadelphia has.
I would be very happy if they select Josh Shapiro. I'm a big supporter. I've been since day one. He's always had my vote, and I'm very excited for the future. He is just very personable. He's personable. I feel like he's done a lot for the state of Pennsylvania thus far, and I'm really excited to see where he goes for the future.
He's been a terrific governor. He's someone who really gets things done. So from that perspective, I would definitely be for him. I think he's someone who's been trying to work with our state legislature, which is more Republican leaning. So he's been doing that. And of course, anyone in Philadelphia will tell you he's the one who got I-95 rebuilt in a phenomenal amount of time. So he understands, I think, what people need and is able to again, get things done.
And in a shocking scenario, it appears some Republicans are switching gears to support Democratic candidate Kamala Harris. In the election battleground state of Arizona, Vice President Harris' campaign was out on Monday to woo Republican voters away from Republican nominee Donald Trump. Tagged the Arizona chapter of Republicans for Harris, a news conference was held to make its case to independent and former Trump voters.
Has moved us away from the foundation we once held dear.
The time has come for us as Arizona Republicans to admit the obvious and to start saying the quiet part out loud, which is that our party's nominee is not qualified for office and that we need to vote for the adult in the room, and that is Kamala Harris.
Over the past few years, I have witnessed, as you all have, a significant shift within our party. A shift that has moved us away from the foundation we once held dear. In 2016, I voted for Donald Trump, believing as a businessman outside the Beltway that he would break up the gridlock that paralyzed our nation's capital. But looking back, I regret that vote. Donald Trump, a twice rejected by his own Congress, somebody who is a convicted criminal, somebody who basically tried to overthrow an almost 250-year standard of government. And you compare that to somebody who has spent her entire career fighting for justice and a host of other things that she's done. And you compare them as candidates for a job. There's just no comparison.
In other news, in the U.S., at least 5 people have been killed, including a 13-year-old boy in Levy County as Tropical Storm Debbie charted a path through Florida. A 38-year-old woman and a 12-year-old boy also died in an SUV crash in Dixie County. More than 16 inches of rainfall in the state fell in the state, causing significant flooding. Hundreds have been rescued from their homes in Florida as Debbie leaves the state. Meanwhile, South Carolina is facing the brunt of the storm today as 2 tornadoes struck down power lines and damaged homes on Edisto Beach and Seabrook Island. Charleston is expected to see a summer's worth of rain this week. Maria Bird, our Channel TV correspondent, joins us now from Washington. Maria, let's begin with the big question on the lips of many. Why this pick? Many are curious if the 6-year-old Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is the right choice for the Democratic ticket, although from the people that spoke, the regular people that spoke, they seem to be happy with the choice. Is everyone happy?
Well, if you remember, there is a real need to kind of show the Democratic Party also being moderate for those moderate Democrats. And this candidate that Vice President Harris has chosen as her running mate for presidential candidacy definitely meets that. Also remember that there were some Republicans that you heard from that are going to actually vote potentially for the Democratic ticket. And remember that John McCain was a very touted and respected and loved Republican out of the state of Arizona. And so those Republicans that are there and knowing the relationship that he's had or his family has had with some Democrats, especially the current president, Joe Biden, just further solidifies why they would have gone in that direction.
And Maria, please help us understand the procedure behind picking a vice presidential candidate. Is it solely on the presidential nominee or the party?
It is strictly on the party and the nominee, but oftentimes in a general election, you can choose between the Democrat or Republican, even if you are the opposite party.
And also, how was he picked? How was Tim Walz picked? Because Kamala Harris had a list to pick from. She narrowed it down to 2 men. So what does Mr. Walz have going for him that he will be so favored, by the party?
He has longevity. He has his moderateness. He has the fact that he has been a part of the Democratic Party now for quite some time. And he represents a part of the party that has not necessarily, many feel, has been reflected with this current nomination of who our presidential candidate might be.
Right. We heard from a few people that were interviewed who are from, the state where he governed. And, they were quite happy with it, saying that he's a fantastic choice for Kamala Harris as a vice presidential candidate. But how are Democrats and Republicans reacting to this? One can only imagine the backlash from Republicans.
Yes, that definitely is true. But I think that these Republicans that are speaking out are those a part of the base of the party, the traditional Republicans, as you heard from them. And they were very unhappy with what they saw in 2016 from the former president. And so that's what you're seeing. And I think Democrats, those who are very much in support of the vice president, Kamala Harris, are happy. And those who were a little bit unsure now have a person that'll be her running mate that really fits in alignment with the moderate Democratic Party.
And let's shift from politics to humanitarian issues. The flooding in the weather in Florida, if I could put it that way. How are people coping? I assume that it's just, not the entire Florida that's affected, but those that were affected. How are they coping? Okay, I think we've lost contact with Maria, but we'll catch up with her later to see how people are coping with the weather in Florida. Let's move on to Britain. It's been more than a week now since 3 children were killed and 5 others critically injured in a knife attack in the United Kingdom. Since then, there has been continuing disorder and anti-immigration protests across the country, fueled in part by false claims that the suspect was a refugee who arrived in the UK by boat in 2023. Our correspondent Teniola Oyetayo has reactions from London, which has so far remained relatively calm amid the unrest.
Scenes of violence like these have plagued towns and cities across the UK since July the 30th, the day after 3 young girls were killed in Southport, northwest England. Rioters have gathered in about 20 locations so far, with cities including Birmingham, Liverpool, Manchester and Leeds targeted. In London, which has the largest number of migrants among all regions of the UK and a huge Nigerian community, there have been no major protests or significant disturbances. Many say they are appalled by the events that have played out in other parts of the country.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely appalling, and it's shocking that people in this country are like that. Especially as they tagged it on, the terrible death of those children, what those poor families must think. And, you think in today's world we'd all get along, wouldn't you? But I just think, I feel really ashamed that things like that can happen in this country today.
The riots are absolutely appalling. I can't see any justification for them. It's all based upon a false thing. What happened in Southport is terrible to the children there, and it's just being exploited by extremists for no good reason. I think they just want to punch up a lot of these people, and it's just so depressing, and more people are getting involved, and they're using all sorts of pretexts and excuses basically to cause a lot of damage.
I just think it's absolutely terrible that the right wing have decided to take over, and what was a really heartbreaking situation for some families, they've just used that as an excuse now to bring out the worst in themselves. And I feel the government does need to come down hard. I think they probably need to bring in the army just as a deterrent to stop these thugs from basically attacking innocent people, whether they're immigrants or not, or if they're asylum seekers or not. They have every right to be here just as much as anyone else. And the people that are born here of different colours, we have just as much right to be here as anyone else. And they're just thugs, basically.
Anti-migrant rhetoric has been increasingly widespread in Britain in recent years, with critics saying that trend has emboldened far-right sympathisers and contributed to the recent riots.
Less than 4 weeks ago, we were celebrating England in the final of the Euros, and everybody was excited. The whole country was excited, regardless of what color you are, black, white, brown. Everybody was having a good time, you know, believing the cup is coming home. And then a few weeks down the line, we are seeing people can't get out, and it has been really, really shocking. But we kind of see it coming. Like over the last, let's say, a decade or more, it has been a constant rhetoric from the political class. You know, we had Theresa May with the hostile environment. You have David Cameron cut migration to tens of thousands. So you have all of this that has been coming up. I mean, even in the last elections, you had people like Jacob Rees-Mogg saying, "Let us do a deal with reform." You know, let us, you know, and we know the rhetoric has been like cut migration, cut migration, cut migration. So we feel that a particular demographic is being demonized, you know, and that you could see it blowing up. And when the shocking, barbaric incident happened of the girls that were murdered in Southport, it just triggered so many fake news online saying the culprit here is an asylum seeker that came by boat. Some people said the culprit is a Muslim, and that wasn't true. It was because the culprit was less than 18. That was why the court could not name the person. So it just triggered the gunpowder that we've all been sitting on.
The Nigerian High Commission on Monday released a statement warning citizens planning to visit the UK. The alert advises Nigerians to be extra vigilant and self-aware at all times and to avoid crowded areas, large gatherings, and political processions and rallies. Malaysia, India, and Australia have also issued travel warnings. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has warned rioters that they will face the full force of the law.
I utterly condemn the far-right thuggery we've seen this weekend. Be in no doubt, those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow. I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online and then running away themselves.
More than 400 people have been arrested so far in relation to the riots, and dozens have been charged. The offence of violent disorder carries a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison, while rioting carries a penalty of up to 10 years in prison. From London, Teniola Uyetayo, Channels Television News.
And updates from Bangladesh, anti-government protests now. The country's parliament has been dissolved the day after Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was forced from power. Ms. Hasina resigned and fled the country after weeks of students-led protests spiraled into deadly unrest. Meanwhile, the United States has welcomed an interim government in Bangladesh. Speaking at a news conference in Washington, U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller urged the interim government formation process to be democratic and inclusive.
আমরা এই দেশের জনগণকে জানাচ্ছি আপনারা অতি শীঘ্রই নেমে আসুন, আপনাদের সন্তানদেরকে বাঁচান, আপনাদের আমাদের রাষ্ট্রপতি বলেছে কি বলেছে আন্দোলন করছে না, পুলিশ দিয়ে আন্দোলন।
Turning to Bangladesh, we have seen the announcement that Prime Minister Hasina resigned from her position and departed Bangladesh. We are monitoring the situation carefully. The United States stands with the people of Bangladesh. We urge all parties to refrain from further violence. Too many lives have been lost over the course of the past several weeks, and we urge calm and restraint in the days ahead. We welcome the announcement of an interim government and urge any transition be conducted in accordance with Bangladesh's laws. Finally, we are deeply saddened about the reports of human rights abuses, casualties, and injuries over the weekend and past weeks. We share our deepest condolences with those who lost loved ones and those who are suffering.
Welcome back. We continue the world today in Ethiopia, where at least 13 people have been killed by a landslide triggered by heavy rains in southern Ethiopia's Walaita area. Authorities say more than 300 people have been evacuated from the area in Kindo Didaye district, even as they expect the death toll to rise, especially because the number of those unaccounted for remains unknown. According to the regional government, a frantic rescue effort is underway. Monday's landslide appeared to be less deadly than one that occurred last month in another area in southern Ethiopia, where more than 200 people were killed. Landslides are common during Ethiopia's rainy season, which started in July and is expected to last until mid-September. Well, hundreds of protesters have marched across Mogadishu's Lido beach to condemn the August 2nd Al-Shabaab attack that killed dozens of people. At least 37 civilians were killed and 212 were injured in an explosion at the popular beach restaurant Lido Beach last Friday. It was the deadliest attack in the Horn of Africa country since twin car bombs detonated near a busy market intersection in October 2022 killed at least 100 people and wounded 300 others. There was no immediate claim of responsibility by the Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab, which has claimed similar attacks in the past, including the car bomb attack in 2022. Of African court has charged 96 Libyan nationals with violating the country's Immigration Act. The men appeared at White River Magistrate Court for the first time since their arrest last week after police raided a secret military camp. Local media reports that the camp contains drugs and training equipment. According to authorities, the Libyans entered South Africa in April on study permits to become security guards, but instead allegedly received military training. The magistrate court suspended the matter for further investigation with extra charges pending.
As now they are detained under the Immigration Act because they violated or falsified their visa application coming here to South Africa. They indicated upon applying their visa that they are coming here for a training, security training. When we drill deep, we find out no, it was not about the security training, it's about the military training. Then the investigation is still continuing. We are convinced that all the features are the features of a military base. So therefore we can safely say indeed it was a military base, not a security training.
Tagged the largest collection of preserved ancient wooden structures in the world, the Forbidden City has become one of China's biggest tourist centers. Not only does it attract a lot of guests from across the world, it has also become a place of pilgrims sort of for the locals who show up in their hundreds daily. This next report takes a look at the history of a revered palace turned national museum with a notorious name.
It's the thick of summer in the People's Republic of China, and it has encouraged a beehive of activities around tourist spots in the country. Here in the capital city, Beijing, the human traffic appears to funnel in one of the directions, the location of the World Heritage Site listed in 1987, the Forbidden City. The stream of people consists mainly of the Chinese, either in small groups or families, and they troop in to see a part of history that has been standing for over 5 centuries. So how did a glaring architectural masterpiece get labeled forbidden?
Why this place is called Forbidden City? Yes, long years ago, this district was an imperial place. Ordinary people were not allowed to go inside, so it's forbidden. Okay, Forbidden City was first built in 1406 by Emperor Zhu Di, who is the third emperor of Ming Dynasty. Yes, that guy decided to move the capital from southern China to northern China.
Built from 1406 to 1420 by almost 1 million workers, the city reigned as the political and ceremonial seat of power for China.
Where was the emperor staying? That's the offices of emperor. Behind it is a living area. So you can see there are some small palaces. For his birthday, she would receive gifts from here. Now behind it, there are small.
While it served as home for the emperor and his immediate family, it was also the place where he, alongside his cabinet and military hierarchy, hosted important national events. It was a glorious space which became prime target in times of war.
Forbidden City suffered so much in history. Now, first time in 1860, Anglo and French Allied forces invaded China. They launched the Second Opium War. Forbidden City was burned by fire. Okay, almost all the treasures were robbed by them. So if you like to watch Chinese treasures, I recommend you go to British Museum. There are so much.
The architecture remains the same, even though some maintenance work is carried out as required. Today, it is not only a place that is shown off to tourists to take beautiful pictures for social media, it also serves as a big history lesson for the younger Chinese generation.
Okay, we can see some students group over here. Nowadays, we emphasize the Chinese culture now in education. Yes, so now each student need to learn traditional culture. It's very helpful for them. Yes, actually, it's very interesting. I remember when I was a boy, I visited Forbidden City. Now some guys, took a rock T-shirt of Beatles, Michael Jackson, Queen, and so on. So you can see the conflict between Chinese culture and the Western culture. So nowadays, we have developed so much. Now people begin to realize that now how about the meaning for Chinese. So now government and some department emphasize the traditional culture education.
And they're happy to share this history and heritage with the rest of the world as they remain friendly and warm towards all tourists.
Many artists deploy unique ways to create their stunning works, but a London artist identified as James Cook has taken up interest in vintage typewriters, which he uses to create incredible portraits and art pieces. Take a look.
London artist James Cook has gained international recognition for his drawings featuring thousands of letters and symbols printed from vintage typewriters. It all goes down at his London studio, where he meticulously creates incredibly detailed portraits. He's been doing this for over 10 years now.
I started creating typewriter art back in 2014, and it began as basically a school project to begin with, which somehow ended up becoming just a hobby, really. But yeah, the one thing I found from just early stages of learning to do this was there's really not much information online about typewriter art. It's kind of one of those forgotten art forms.
He also speaks about his most challenging artwork, the Manhattan skyline, which was commissioned as part of the 400th anniversary of the city.
So this is by far probably one of the most challenging projects that I've worked on. So this is the Lower Manhattan skyline, which I finished just before Christmas last year, and it's taken me about 2 to 3 months to complete, and has probably somewhere in the region of about 1 million individually typed, letters, numbers, punctuation marks.
The London-based artist has now amassed a collection of over 100 vintage typewriters, with a device used to print sheet music among his most prized machines.
Perhaps one of my most prized typewriters is this machine right here, which is a music writer. And what's so special about this is it contains musical notes instead of the alphabet. So this was built to improve the way that musicians would write sheet music. And this is an incredibly rare machine, so they only built about 50 of these. And within kind of the inner circles of typewriter collectors, I had to trade an Arabic typewriter as a part trade just to get this machine.
Cook says he can create about 50 artworks a year and sells them through his website. The artist also runs limited prints ranging from roughly 150 to 400, depending on the piece.
A refreshing way to end our show today. Thank you so much for watching The World Today. I'm Joke Rogers. Bye for now.